Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I was just doing some random research. I'm always trying to expand my knowledge about gospel things and church history, and even the history of these churches that are here in Independence, Missouri. And I came across this, and it had a key bit of data that I was looking for that helps, fill out the bigger picture that I'm trying to put together. So, we're going to talk about this really interesting story where a man burned the white chapel on the temple lot. And then we're going to talk about membership numbers of Church of Christ as well as Community of Christ, because I was able to find, for me, what I think are really important numbers for the research I'm trying to do. And they're really interesting. And I think that you'll find it interesting too. Now, what we're going to read here first, I already knew that this took place. When you go to the Church of Christ temple lot, White Chapel, like in the like foyer on the lower level, they have like a little visitor center where there's pamphlets and a copy of their church magazine, and then they have the two stones that were placed to mark the spot of the temple lot. And then they have this binder with a bunch of historic images, and there's a picture there of the White Chapel when it was burning. It looks a little bit different now. It's still white, but it's like been changed since they reconstructed it. But it's kind of a stunning image. Well, there's obviously a story behind that, and I I didn't know all the details behind the story. I'm not laughing at the tragedy, but I think you'll see what I mean. So, of all places, this is printed in Deseret News. So let's read the story, and then let's get into the interesting numbers that I found. Okay, charges of second-degree arson and second-degree burglary were filed Tuesday against a man who barricaded himself inside a historic church on New Year's Day, then did a dance after he emerged from the burning building. Firefighters were kept back by police because of threats against anyone who approached the Church of Christ temple lot. And by the time the man surrendered, flames had spread so far that the church was destroyed. The charges were filed against Jordan Smith, 25, a former member of the denomination, who had been expelled for joining another church. Smith pleaded innocent to the two charges, and Jackson County Circuit Judge Robert L. Trout set his bond at $35,000 and scheduled a preliminary hearing for January 10th. Okay, now, that's not all. Smith, whose cheeks were brightly painted when he came out of the church, had called police about 11 a.m. Monday saying he was armed and had hand grenades. Police set up a command post and maintained telephone contact with Smith, and eventually he agreed to come out if he were allowed to perform a dance. Quote, "It was kind of what we white people would envision a war dance to be," said Alvin Harris, pastor of the 200-member church and business manager of the 2,300 member denomination. Okay, so this is kind of like this was like the main thing that I pulled out of this that I wanted was this number, because up until this point, there's only been one number for their membership that I've been able to find, and it's like 7,000, a little over 7,000 people. They're not a very big church. You have them that own the temple lot, only about 7,000, and then you have Community of Christ that's also in this area. They're larger at about 250,000, and then there's us, where we're about to go on to 18 million, probably sometime this year. But anyway, we'll get back to that number in just a minute. It's interesting what I'm about to show you. Okay, but back to this pastor, Alvin Harris of Church of Christ Temple Lot. I don't know that he is Indian or claimed to be. He had war paint on his face and may have been thinking that. End quote. Smith was unarmed when he emerged, and police said they found no sign of weapons Monday or in further searches. Tuesday of what was left of the two-story, 90-year-old building. What? Or in further searches Tuesday of what was left of the 2-story, 90-year-old building. It's a shame. 90 years. It's a long time. Harris said church officials had been able to salvage all their records, although some were water damaged. He said an old pulpit was saved as well, along with some office furniture. But Harris said the building was a total loss and will have to be torn down. He said members of the congregation would meet later in the week to discuss future plans. And then later on, Harris called Jordan Smith a quote-unquote church hopper who has been a member of all 3 restoration branches, quote, and maybe other Protestant churches as well. And then as a follow-up, this was printed a year later. So this was back in 1990, and now in 1991, jurors recommended that Smith serve 4 years in prison on the arson charge and 1 year on the burglary charge. He said his dreams the night before convinced him that God wished him to make a public point. Quote, "At all times, I felt I was obeying a higher power," Smith said. He said he used a cigarette lighter to ignite parts of the church. It's interesting because we went over a similar, or like kind of a similar story of another person that clearly wasn't in their right mind who made a threat against Howard W. Hunter at a BYU devotional. He claimed that he had a bomb, and it was a really interesting story. If you didn't watch it, just go back like a week or two and you'll find that video. But, it's not just us. And of course, it's not just us in Church of Christ Temple Lot. You always have people out there that do things like this and have mental issues. But anyway, this is what happened. But now I want to shift into their membership, like how many members of their church they have. I'm more and more, I'm realizing that I need to use these AI chatbots to find things, because one thing that they're really good for is research, to find needles in haystacks. And what I'm doing, just so you understand why I do this, for one thing, I do it because I'm trying to put out content that you'll find interesting, and I want to learn more about the church. And but I also, it's like so my dad passed away back in 2015 when I was in the Army. Several years later, my mom remarried, and the man that she married, he does all these model airplanes. This is not one of them. This is just a stock image. But he has tons of model airplanes. It's a passion of his, and he does a really good job. And they always look very, very detailed because he puts his heart and soul into it. And for me, working on these spreadsheets is the equivalent. I want to grab every bit of data that I can. I want to reconstruct church history and Church of Christ Temple Lot history, Community of Christ history, and then, find all the quotes that I can for all the different topics that we're interested in. It's a passion project. I love doing this. And so that's why I have to do this. So I used Grok. That's my preferred chatbot. And it was able to deliver more that I was looking for. I do want to point out, you always have to verify. It recommended this. This is the Association of Religion Data Archives. And if you just took this at face value, you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, 1940, they had 2,100, 1951, 22. But you see this number 1 right here, this footnote 1? It talks about the fact that they get it from this book, Yearbook of American and Canadian Churches. I actually looked this up on archive.org and found out that the numbers that they were reporting, or at least it seems, because when I looked at our church, the numbers weren't right. The numbers that they're reporting are just members in America or the United States and Canada. So I'm not using these numbers. I just want to point this out. Whenever you do your own research, just make sure you really know what you're copying down. Even then, sometimes you'll make mistakes. But moving forward, this is the number that I had before. This comes from Church of Christ Temple Lot's magazine called Zion's Advocate. This is the issue for July and August of 2013. And it's not part of like any sort of like official report or anything like that. It's just this article written by Sister Amy Moser. And just at the very end, it says the Church of Christ has 7,310 members, with 1,909 of them found in the United States. But it's just a article. It's kind of like a Liahona article. Well, I don't know. It says news, Phoenix local, but it seems like it's just kind of like, just a typical article that you'd find for a certain area. And okay, so you have this, and then I was looking for more using Grok. Fast forward to 2017, and we're back to Deseret News. How two churches with roots in Mormonism overcame conflict and found cooperation in the heartland. And this, of course, is talking about, well, I think it's talking about us in Church of Christ Temple Lot. This paragraph points out Community of Christ, Deseret News was reporting 200,000 members, and then 5,000 members for Church of Christ Temple Lot. So if that's correct, then from 2013 to 2017, they lost about 2,000 members. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's the Deseret News. I'm assuming that this number is correct. I don't know if there was a typo in Zion's Advocate, but the fact remains that you have a discrepancy between these two numbers. Of course, membership either increases or decreases over time. Usually it doesn't just stay the same. But a difference of 2,000, that either means there's a discrepancy in reporting by somebody, or they lost about 2,000 members of their church from 2013 to 2017. And then fast forward a little bit more. This is an article from October 29th, 2018. This was President Nelson's first year as president of the church. And this is from the local Fox 4 Kansas City news station. 3 faiths surround Independence Land where many believe second coming will occur. We've looked at this before. It's an interesting article. At this part, something that I had overlooked before is it's reported here. The smaller 6,000 member Church of Christ Temple Lot claims there have been offers to buy the sacred spot. Okay, so what I did is I decided to add more to my spreadsheet called Timeline Missionary Work, which I'm probably going to rename this to something like Church Stats or something like that. I've hidden a bunch of columns so that we're just focusing on our church membership for each of these years, and then column X is now for Church of Christ Temple Lot, so we can compare it side by side. So I hid all the columns in between for now. So back in 1990, they had about 2,300, and we had about 7.7 million. And then the next data point comes from 2013. By that point, we had 15 million, and they had 7,300. And then fast forward to 2017, Deseret News reported that they had 5,000. And then the next year, Fox 4 reported that they had 6,000. I don't know, like when Deseret News or Fox News, I don't know if they just like asked the people there, just like, oh, how big is your church? And like, that's as far as the research went. I don't know if they looked at an official report. So I don't know how they got those numbers. They are pretty similar. Like there's not a huge difference between 7,000, 5,000, 6,000. But if these numbers are accurate, then there's some fluctuation. And if anything, it seems like they've lost members. So I just want to point that out. I'm not like rooting for their downfall or anything. Of course, I want to see prophecy play out. And in our church, that would require that we build the temple on the temple lot. And I'm assuming that Well, I know that the Lord has some way that that's going to happen, whether this church ends up giving it up for some reason. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe they go extinct like other churches have done. Like there's this church called Church of Jesus Christ that was headed by Alpheus Cutler. He worked on the Nauvoo Temple. After the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, he formed his own splinter group. And they came back here to Independence, and there is a building that you can go to, but the church is extinct. I'm not sure who owns that building, but there's no church anymore. There's just some custodian of the building. So is that what's going to happen with Church of Christ Temple Law? I don't know, but I just want to keep on top of these things and see how it plays out. We'll just put it all in the Lord's hand. The Lord's hands. Before we talk about Community of Christ, because I was able to find some good numbers for Community of Christ, I just want to finish off this article just as a refresher. Okay, so this is Sheldon, is his last name. I don't know if it says his first name here, but he's a representative of Church of Christ Temple Lot. He said in 1990, the church was burned down by a crazy man. So he reminds us of that. We know the devil doesn't like this place. We know the devil would like to erase us and eliminate us. But when you're dealing with God, that ain't going to be done, Sheldon said. When asked by Fox 4, elders with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints said they're not trying to acquire the temple lot ground. But Sheldon said there have been inquiries as recently as this year. I wish I knew specifically if Sheldon is saying that our church has made inquiries. Again, I'll remind you that this was 2018. President Nelson at this point was the new president of the church. And it was under President Nelson that we acquired the Kirtland Temple from Community of Christ. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were inquiries. Maybe it was from us. Maybe it wasn't that we were making a real attempt to acquire the temple lot, but maybe there was some kind of communication where it's like, okay, it is now 2018. Where do you stand on this? We just want to have some dialogue. I don't know. Maybe there were other parties that were interested that Sheldon doesn't mention here. But continuing, he says, he insists it's not for sale and lives each day keeping his mind ready for the second coming of Jesus Christ right here in Independence. And Sheldon is firm on the question of whether his church will ever sell the temple lot ground to the larger Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It ain't happening, never will happen. Well, he's a man of faith, and he believes that because he believes that his church is true. So I respect that, but I would have to disagree. I think that it will. I think that a lot of churches, including Church of Christ Temple Lot, are in trouble because there's more and more people leaving organized religion and just doing individual church. When they think of church, they think of just all Christians, just kind of in an ambiguous way, forming the Church of Christ. But there's a lot of people leaving organized religions and a lot of people not paying tithing. There's a lot of churches that are becoming secular and adopting liberal values, such as the case with Community of Christ. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to survive these trends. Community of Christ already is having a lot of problems, and they're much bigger than Church of Christ Temple Lot. Okay, so now let's go to this. Grok found me this Google document. It's a Google sheet, like the spreadsheets that I maintain. I don't know who the owner of this is, but thankfully they put this together where they have all these numbers from Community of Christ. I'm especially interested in this column B for membership, because it is hard to find anywhere. It's almost impossible to find anywhere that reports their numbers. And it seems that their numbers historically have come from this document called a bulletin from their general conference. They call their general conference World Conference. And thankfully, this person has links to these documents. They're PDF documents. And so I've gone ahead and downloaded these and I verified. I could just copy all these numbers and put it on my own spreadsheet, but I went through, I took the time to look at each one of these, and they do appear to be real. These are authentic documents. That's my assessment. And so, but I still went through and just verified for myself the numbers, and then I added it to my spreadsheet. So, but yeah, it seems like this is some kind of, well, just like I said, this is from, what year is this? 2019. This is the Saturday, Sunday Bulletin, 2019 World Conference. I did check for the most recent conference, which was last year. I was able to witness some of that. They ordained their first prophet president, who's a female. Her name is Stacey D. Cram. And when you go to their website, they do have all these bulletins right here. And I went through all these. And unless I'm missing something, I didn't find one that had the total membership of the church. So I don't think that they put that out anymore. But let's go back to this spreadsheet of mine, and we're going to look at Community of Christ. But we're going to go from this column to this one and hide those for now so we can kind of compare the two churches side by side. And let's go back to right here. I'm still in the process of verifying our numbers because I'm doing the work to validate for myself the numbers that I had on here. Originally, I got our numbers from a Wikipedia article, but I want to be more thorough, more rigorous. And so all my references are here in what's currently column AA. So I've only gone back to 1994. I still have some work to do. But back in 1994, Community of Christ had 248,000. And as you can see, the number doesn't change a whole lot. The next year is also 248, and then 249, 249, and then 250 in 1998. And then something really interesting happens. I'm fascinated if this is accurate. I think that it is. They dropped down to 243. From 1998 to 1999, there was a sizable decrease in church membership. But then it came back up. It rebounded over the next couple of years up to 253 in 2001. But then you have some more fluctuation. I think this is the peak, is in 2003, 255,000, almost 256. But then it goes way down. It goes to 196, then 195, 195, 196, 196. And I don't know what happened right here. I'm still, I'm like I said, I'm trying to keep track of their history too. I have this spreadsheet. Let me just make sure it's the right one. Nope. No, it's this one. This spreadsheet is called Timeline Community of Christ. And this is really new. It's a very new spreadsheet, so I have a lot of work to do. But I don't know what would have caused that dip. This one right here. So where were we? The first dip is right here in 1998. So let's go to this spreadsheet. As far as I can tell, nothing too big happened in 1998. In 1996, W. Grant McMurray became the first prophet president of Community of Christ outside the Smith family. Because before this point, my understanding is that each prophet president was a direct descendant of Joseph Smith. And over time, they've moved further and further away from their roots. further away from the Book of Mormon, further away from the original teachings of the church. And in 1996, they reached this milestone within their own tradition, departing from their own tradition. So I don't know if this like somehow contributed to that, but there was that dip in 1998. And then, like we saw, things rebounded. But then there was a pretty dramatic dip after 2003. Now, 2 years before 2003, that's when they changed their name to Community of Christ. They went from the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to Community of Christ. So anytime you have a change, like really big changes, even within our own church, there's always friction. There's always people that don't like it for whatever reason. And I don't know, maybe this was kind of like a schism moment for some. Before this point, the big schisms that I'm aware of, the first one came back. Here, let me get rid of that. The first one that I'm aware of came back in 1925 when the concept of supreme directional control was implemented, which centralized power within the church, I guess, to the prophet president. So the church became more centralized, and people didn't like that. So at that time, there were a number of people that left the RLDS and either joined our church or went over to Church of Christ Temple Lot. And then the next big schism that I'm aware of came in 1984. And I guess you could also say 1985. In 1984, Prophet President Wallace B. Smith introduced Doctrine and Covenants 156, which allows for women to be ordained to the priesthood. And then that went into effect the November of the next year in 1985. I think really that this is when you had the big schism, which resulted in what's called the Restoration branches. It's essentially just all these autonomous branches of the RLDS that broke off, and to this day, they're just kind of a loose federation, constellation of branches that haven't coalesced into a new denomination. But with what we're talking about in this video, maybe there was more of that going on with, W. Grant McMurray, and then changing the name to Community of Christ. Maybe there were people that just really didn't like that. I don't know how else to explain this. Going from 255 to 196, I don't know. Fast forward, that number kind of stayed the same for a while, and then there's a big jump for some reason from 2012 to 2013. And then from that time, it kind of just stays the same. It stays like within the 250,000 range. One thing that I saw was that same article that we were reading from Deseret News, where it talked about Church of Christ Temple Lot having 5,000 membership. They said that Community of Christ had 200,000, but according to Community of Christ reporting, it was more like 251,000. So maybe Deseret News didn't do that great of a job with reporting the numbers in that year. I don't know. It's tricky. There may also be some other thing, some other nuance that I'm not aware of when we're seeing these big dips or these bumps. Like maybe it's like the way that they counted members of the church. Maybe there's just something I don't understand with how they count members, and maybe they kind of like changed policy over time to where it's like, oh no, it's roughly been the same. The reason why you're seeing a dip is because with this group of people, for these years, we didn't really count them or something. I don't know. But the last like specific number that we get for Community of Christ came from 2018 of all years, with 251,000, almost 252, like really close to 252. And then the last approximation that I'm aware of came from 2020. And this came from what's it called? Community of Christ and Consolidated Affiliates, Consolidated Financial Report, dated December 31st, 2020. And they just said that the church had approximately 250,000. So I'm very satisfied to have found these numbers. I do have questions. I question the authenticity of some of the numbers or the accuracy of some of the numbers, but I think it's close enough to reality. And I'm going to take the time to, fill in all these previous years and do more research and have a more complete picture. But I've never been more happy with this spreadsheet than I am now. I made this recent change where originally I was just keeping track of church membership and then the number of missionaries. But then I started going through the church's statistical reports, and I added, everything that they report. The number of temples dedicated and operations, stakes, missions, districts, wards, and branches. I even added nations and territories in which the church has a presence, because that's been reported sometimes. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if you like thinking about these things like I do. I think it's important to see the big picture because I feel like it helps you assess the future better. It helps you assess the future. It helps you understand the past. It helps you understand the present. It just gives you a better idea of what's going on. Because if you don't do things like this, then everything's just kind of nebulous and you just don't know any better. All the people that come to Independence on church history trips, with their families, I wonder what they think when they see Church of Christ Temple Lot. Do they realize that it's only like 7,000? Or I think what I'm going to go with, not 7,000. The most recent number that was reported, and it was by Fox 4, was 6,000. So 7,000, something like that. Do they realize that they're that small? That is so small. That's their worldwide number, is 6,000. That's only like, in our church, that's only like a couple steaks. How much does it take to make a steak? I have that number somewhere. I got to look that up really quick. I think I have it under timeline. Yeah, here it is. I updated this to where it showed the requirements for a steak. Okay, so you have to have 2,000 members. Okay, so Church of Christ Temple Lot, by our standards, they're only as large as like 3 steaks. That's kind of stunning, isn't it? They're as large as about 3 of our steaks. And we have a lot of steaks. We have, let's go back to this, because I have that number readily available. Right now, we have 3,695 steaks. So, yeah, it's a big difference in those numbers. But I wonder if people realize that when they come here, or if they realize, the size of Community of Christ. They're relatively speaking, they're not much bigger. They're much larger, by several orders of magnitude than Church of Christ Temple Lot, but they're still very, very small compared to our church. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. That's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.